What do you mean by conditional statements? What does conditional statements include? And what is the syntax and the examples of each conditional statements? Let's understand these topics in our today's video. Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Link Frequency and I'm Aishwarya Pattar. This video is part of a course that is C Programming for Absolute Beginners 2022. So without any further delay, let's get started. Conditional statements are used in implementing decision making in the program. Conditional statement will select a block of code which will be executed based on the given condition. Conditional statement includes if statement, if else statement, nested if else statement and switch statement. Now let's understand all of them in our today's video. Moving on to the first type, that is if statement. It is also known as one-way selection statement. If statement in C is used to execute a code if the condition is true, and also it is a simple decision-making statement. If statement accepts the Boolean values. It is used to decide whether a certain statement or a block of statement will be executed or not. And the following if statement syntax is, it has if and a condition. If the condition is satisfied, then the inside block of the code will be executed, or else it moves to the next statement. So in short, you can say if the expression evaluated is true, then the if block statement will be executed. If the expression evaluated is false, then the control is shifted to the next statement of the program. So moving on to the flowchart of if statement, here we have the condition. If the condition is true, then the if block statements will be executed, and if the condition is false, then the control shifts to the next statement in the program. And finally, the program is terminated. So this was all about the if statement. Then moving on to the next type, that is if else statement. It is also known as two-way selection statement. If else statement in C is used to execute a block of code if the condition is true or false. The syntax of if else statement is as follows. So it has a if and a condition inside it. So if the condition is satisfied, then the inside statement will be executed. If the condition is not satisfied, then the else block statement will be executed. Moving on to the flowchart of if else statement, it has a condition check. If the condition is satisfying or the expression is satisfying, then the if block is executed. If the condition is not satisfying, the else block is executed, and then the next statements are consequently executed, and then finally the program is terminated. Then moving on to our next type of statement, that is nested if else statement. It is also known as multi-way selection statement. Nested if else statement is used when a program requires one or more test expressions. When a series of expressions are to be evaluated in a statement, then we use if else in a nested form. While using if else in a nested form, we have to be very careful about the indentation because of multiple use of the if else statements is involved in the process. So the syntax of nested if else is, it has a condition 1. If this condition 1 is satisfied, then it goes to check for condition 2. If the condition 2 is satisfied, then it executes statement 1. If the condition 2 is not satisfied, then it executes statement 2. Likewise, if the condition 1 itself fails, then it goes to else block, and in the else block it checks for condition 3. If condition 3 is satisfied, then statement 3 is executed. If condition 3 fails, then in the else block we have the statement 4 which will be executed. So this was the syntax of nested if else. Then moving on to the flowchart of nested if else. So nested if else flowchart contains a condition 1. So depending upon the condition 1, that is whether it is true or false, we have the next conditions. If condition 1 is satisfied, then we have a condition 2 check which will be checked, and if the condition 2 is satisfied, then we have statement 1 being executed, or else statement 2 will be executed. On the other side, if condition 1 itself fails, then it checks for condition 3. If condition 3 is satisfied, then our condition statement 3 will be executed. If condition 3 fails, then our statement 4 will be executed, and finally the program is terminated. So this was about nested if else. Then moving on to our last type, that is switch statement. Switch statement is used as a substitute for if else if ladder, which is used to test list of cases. Switch statement contains one or more test labels which are used to test against switch expressions. If the expression matches the case, then the associated statement with that case will be executed. There are few things to remember while using switch statement. The expression must be either an integer or a character. The case label must be unique and must end with a colon. The break statement is optional, that is, it will transfer the control out of the switch statement. Even the default statement is optional. If the expression doesn't match any of the cases, then the default statement will be executed. Now let's move ahead to understand the syntax of the switch statement. So, our switch statement has an expression and it has different cases. If our cases match with the expression, then the statements will be executed. For example, if case 1 is satisfied, then our statement 1 will be executed. And if case 2 is satisfied, then our statement 2 will be executed. If none of the cases are satisfied, then we will execute the default statement. Here, break is used to come out of the loop of the switch condition. Then, moving on to understanding the flowchart of the switch statement. So, here you can see there is an expression for the switch statement and then it checks for the case 1. If case 1 is satisfied, then the statement 1 will be executed. If case 2 is satisfied, then statement 2 will be executed. If none of the cases are satisfied, then we have the default statement which will be executed and then the program terminates. So, this was all about the 4 types of conditional statements. Now, let's understand each of the conditional statements with examples. Let's move ahead to our screen to know the examples. So, our first example is for if statement. So, here you can see we are using the data which is of type integer and the input is taken from the user. Here we are going to check whether our input data is greater than 5 or no. So, here we are only using a if block. So, if our input data is greater than 5, then it enters the if condition statement. If it is not, then it goes on to the next statement which is there in the program. Now let us run the code for a positive test case. So let me enter the data value as 10. Here you can see enter data is valid and satisfy the if condition. So here 10 is greater than 5, that is the reason the inside printf is executed, and once this execution is done, it goes on to execute the next statement in the program. Now let's run the code again to check for a negative test case. Let me give an input data less than 5. For example, let me give 3. Here you can see the if condition statement is not executed. It directly jumps to execute the statement which is there in the next statement from the program, indicating that this block of code is not satisfying the input. That is the reason it goes for the next statement in the code. So this was all about using an if statement. So if statement you can use when you want to control a block of statement to be executed or not. Moving on to example of our next conditional statement, that is if else statement. On the screen you can see an example of if else statement. Here we are using data of type int and the input is taken from user. Here we are going to basically check whether our input data is greater than 25 or not. Once the input is taken from the user, it checks the data whether it is greater than 25. If the condition is satisfying, then it executes the printf statement present in the if block. If the input data is very much less than 25, then the else block is executed, which executes this particular printf statement. And once these condition checks are done, then it moves on to the next statement in the program, that is the next printf statement will be executed. Let's understand this code by running the entire code for a positive test case. So let me enter a value as 30. So here you can see enter data is greater than 25. That is a true statement. So it is executing this particular statement because our data is greater than 25. Let's go for a negative test case check. Let me enter data as 20. Here you can see enter data is lesser than 25. That is a false statement. So our data is lesser than 25. So it is executing the else block. And once this execution is done, it is going on to the next statement in the program. That is the next printf statement is executed. Then moving on to the example for our next conditional statement, that is nested if else statement. Looking at the screen, you can see the example of the nested if else statement. Here we are going to check for the largest number with a given input of 3. So here we are using data 1, 2, 3 as type integer and the input is taken from the user. So here what happens is our first condition check is having data 1 is greater than data 2. If this is satisfied, then it enters the condition check number 2 where it checks for data 1 is greater than data 3. If this particular condition is satisfying, then it prints that data 1 is largest, but if the condition is not satisfying, then it prints that data 3 is the largest. But what if the first condition check is itself failing? Then it goes to the else block. Here it checks for the one more condition 3 where it has data 2 is greater than data 3. If this condition check is valid, then it executes this particular printf statement which indicates data 2 is the largest. But if the condition check fails, then it goes to the else part where it indicates data 3 is the largest. And ultimately the program is completed. Now let's run this code for a positive condition test case. Let me enter the values 10, 20, 30. So here you can see the largest is 30. So after executing all these condition checks one by one, so we got the largest number. So this was all about the nested if else condition. In nested if else condition, you have to be very careful about the indentation because there are multiple if else conditions used. To avoid the confusion, maintain a proper indentation. Then moving on to the example of our next conditional statement, that is switch statement. The screen represents the switch statement example which is used for the number of days in a week. Here, day is of type integer and the input is taken from the user for the number of the day. Here you can see the switch has an expression as a day and there are multiple cases, like case 1 represents it's a Sunday and there is a break. Here break is used to come out of that switch expression. So likewise we have indicated all the days in from case 1 to 7, and lastly we have a default statement. Default statement is used when any of the cases doesn't match the expression, then the default statement will be executed. For example, if the user doesn't give a proper condition or the case value, then the default statement will be indicated as a reminder to the user. So here you have the default statement as input is not a valid number. So now let's run this code to check our positive test case. Okay, let me input the value as 5. So here you can see it's a Thursday. The case 5 is executed. Similarly, let me execute again for any number. Consider, let me execute it for 3. So you can see it is Tuesday. So this was a positive test case. Now what if the user gives any number beyond number of days? For example, let me run a negative test case to see this. For example, let me give input as 8. So now you can see input is not valid number. So here default statement is getting executed. So this was the use of switch statement. Looking at all these examples, we try to understand the conditional statements. So if there are any queries, then you can surely comment down in the comment section and it will be answered as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching our video. I hope you would enjoy the video content. Consider subscribing to our channel link frequency and also don't forget to share our videos across your connections. Until we meet on our next video, happy learning. Tune yourself to make a difference.